My brother hurt my wife, and with my wife's help, his own wife sent him to prison. Growing up in an upper-middle-class family in a small town in Minnesota, my brother Samuel and I had a relationship that was anything but normal. From the moment he was born, Samuel became the center of our parents' universe. They never saw any wrongdoing in him, while somehow, everything that went wrong was always blamed on me. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that Samuel's behavior was never addressed, and my family's enabling behavior only made things worse. Samuel and I were close in age, but from the start, our family dynamics were skewed. Our parents showered Samuel with attention while I was left to fend for myself. Over the years, Samuel exhibited disturbing behavior, something that should have raised red flags, but our parents dismissed it. When he was 6, Samuel deliberately broke my gaming console because I wouldn't let him play when he wanted to. Instead of being punished, my parents bought him a new one and told me I should have shared better. At 12, he killed my pet hamster by feeding it chocolate, despite knowing it was toxic. My parents brushed it off as an accident, blaming me for not keeping a closer eye on my pet. As we got older, Samuel's behavior became more troubling. In high school, he spread rumors that I had cheated on my girlfriend, causing us to break up. But my parents didn't question him. They said he was just protecting her. Over time, Samuel sabotaged every relationship I tried to have. He made up stories about me having a gambling addiction, about cheating on my girlfriends, things that were completely false. Each time my parents either defended him or accused me of exaggerating. I never imagined that Samuel's actions would escalate to such dangerous levels. But when I introduced my girlfriend Victoria to my family, everything changed, though Victoria and I had been dating for 8 months. She is kind, compassionate, and works as a pediatric nurse. Our relationship was strong, and I wanted her to meet my family, even though I had kept her away for months to protect her from Samuel's behavior. When I finally introduced her, it was supposed to be a normal family dinner. But things took a terrifying turn that evening. From the moment Victoria walked in, Samuel started behaving inappropriately. He pushed our mother aside just to hug Victoria, holding on far too long. Throughout the evening, Samuel kept finding excuses to touch her arm, shoulder, and sit next to her. He even tried to feed her from his own fork, making intense eye contact. Victoria was visibly uncomfortable, but she remained polite, not wanting to cause a scene at our first family gathering. But it didn't stop there. Samuel began telling embarrassing stories about me from childhood, twisting them to make me look like a fool. He even fabricated a story about how he had to rescue a high school girlfriend from my supposed emotional abuse, something that never happened. Victoria knew these stories were lies because I had already explained the truth to her, but my parents just sat there, nodding along like Samuel was telling gospel truth. It was clear to me that no one in my family was going to stand up for what was right. Later that night, after dinner, things got even worse. Victoria had offered to help clean up, trying to be kind. I was helping my dad in the garage when I noticed she was gone for a while. I found her in the kitchen, where Samuel had literally cornered her by the sink. He was standing way too close, telling her she deserved someone more exciting than his boring, unstable older brother. Fuera. Victoria had already told him to back off twice, but he wouldn't listen. When she saw me, she looked relieved and immediately came to stand by me. Samuel just laughed it off like it was all a joke, but I could see the fear in Victoria's eyes. I could feel her trembling, and something inside me snapped. This was supposed to be a happy occasion, but Samuel had completely wrecked it with his obsessive behavior. I decided that enough was enough. It was time for Samuel to face the consequences for his actions. Over the following days, things only escalated. Victoria started receiving strange calls and texts from unknown numbers. At first, it was just heavy breathing, followed by hang-ups. Then they began leaving creepy messages, calling her a stuck-upper and a frigid for rejecting a better option. They even mentioned specific details about her work schedule and what she was wearing. It was clear someone was watching her. I recognized some of the voices as Samuel's old friends, guys who were still loyal to him and did whatever he asked because of the money his parents provided. When Victoria blocked those numbers, they just started calling from new ones. Samuel's friends even began showing up at the hospital where Victoria worked, pretending to be visitors but just hanging around the pediatric ward, staring at her for hours. It was becoming unbearable. One night, one of them followed Victoria to her car after her shift. She was so terrified she called me, crying, too scared to drive home. I rushed to pick her up, and we had to take extra precautions to ensure we weren't being followed. Victoria started having panic attacks before her shifts, and her coworkers began noticing something was wrong. It was clear to me that Samuel's harassment was taking a toll on her, and it wasn't something I could ignore any longer. I gathered evidence, voicemails, text messages, security footage from the hospital showing Samuel's friends stalking Victoria. With the evidence in hand, I confronted Samuel directly at our parents' house. He didn't care. He just sat there with a smug smirk on his face while I showed him the proof. When I confronted him about the harassment, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, Maybe if Victoria wasn't such a stuck-up bitch, people wouldn't feel the need to teach her a lesson. That was the moment I snapped. I punched him. It wasn't a violent blow, just enough to make a point, but Samuel acted like I had tried to kill him. He cried and my parents rushed in to defend him as always. They didn't even look at the evidence I had shown them. My mother was hysterical about her baby boy being attacked, and my father accused me of being jealous of Samuel. They refused to see the truth and instead blamed Victoria for everything. My mother even suggested that Victoria had led Samuel on and was now playing the victim. My father told me to leave their house until I apologized to Samuel, and it got my head straight. I left and moved in with Victoria, but things only got worse. Samuel's friends continued harassing Victoria, and the police wouldn't take action because they lacked direct proof that Samuel was behind it all. My parents were still defending Samuel, despite the overwhelming evidence, and I couldn't take it anymore. I had to protect Victoria, and that meant cutting ties with my family completely. Weeks later, at a family wedding, everything finally came to a head. Samuel assaulted Victoria in the hallway outside the bathrooms, and when the police arrived, my parents tried to prevent his arrest. They even blamed Victoria for the attack, claiming she had seduced Samuel. But the evidence, witnesses, security footage, and Samuel's meltdown during his arrest was enough to expose the truth. Samuel was arrested and charged with domestic violence. My father was also arrested for witness intimidation. Samuel eventually pled guilty to aggravated domestic violence and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. My mother started therapy, and she even filed for divorce from my father, finally realizing the damage they had caused by enabling Samuel's behavior for so long. As for me and Victoria, we've made a life for ourselves far away from my toxic family. We've bought a home, and Victoria is thriving in her career. We're expecting our first child, and while I still struggle with the aftermath of everything that happened, I know that leaving my family behind was the right decision. My life has changed completely, and while I wish things had been different, I'm grateful that I now have a family of my own, one built on love, trust, and respect.